Hello guys, this is CannibalChess, and in today's video we're going to be looking at some lines from the Tennison Gambit that you can use to trick your opponent and get a winning position in any of your games. And most of these are going to work for opponents that are 1600 or below, just letting y'all know. So starting off with the first one, the most common one that you're probably going to be able to use, you start with knight to f3, your opponent plays d5, and here you play e4 immediately, hoping that they take the pawn. And so if they accept the gambit, then now you play knight to g5, so you just attack their pawn, hoping that they'll try and defend it in some way. And for this variation, or this line that we're going to look at, we are going to be looking at them playing knight to f6. So if they play knight to f6, then here you just play pawn to d3. And they don't really have to take, but if they do, it's just better for you in general, because now you can take with the light square bishop. You now have a way to castle, and their pieces are a little bit less developed in general. And now is where the trick happens. So if you're playing someone a little bit lower rated than like 1600, they're probably going to want to get rid of this knight because it's being defended by the bishop, so you don't really want it there. It's eyeing this weak f7 pawn, so you'd want to try and get rid of it, and they might play something like pawn to h6 to try and get it out of black's camp here. So if they play pawn to h6, though, this is actually a winning position for white after white takes the pawn on f7 actually. So you momentarily give up your knight, so king takes, and then here you also give up your bishop, so you play bishop g6, so check the king, and the king can't really do anything. I mean, the king could go over here or like right here, but you might as well take the bishop. There's nothing really you can do. You can't really go back to defend the queen, so you might as well just take the bishop, and then here you can pick up black's queen, and you have a completely winning position here. So that was the first line. Let's go into the next one. So this line that we're going to look at right now is a line that you would probably get into if your opponent really wanted to hang on to that pawn on e4. And so you start off, after they play bishop to f5, you start off by playing knight to c3, so you target the pawn twice, and so they feel like they have to defend it again so they don't lose it. So they play knight to f6, and here you play queen to e2 to attack it 3 times. They only have 2 defenders, so they have to bring the queen over here to defend the pawn as well. And at this point, you basically have a winning position already. And so it may not look like it, but what you can do here is you can play queen check on b5. And so you're basically attacking the bishop, you're checking the king, and you're also attacking this weak pawn on b7. And so basically black can't do anything to defend all of those. So they can only defend maybe the bishop or something like that at once. So the best move for black here is to actually defend the king with the bishop. If they don't do that, if they play something like pawn to c6 or something like that, then best move for white is to just pick up the free bishop basically. But if black doesn't do any of these types of moves, then the best move for white after bishop to d7 is to take the pawn on b7, so you're threatening to pick up this rook on a8. And so what now black would probably want to do is try and defend the rook. So the bishop is defended by the knight, and so the bishop can now guard the rook. So it seems pretty safe for black in this position, but it's actually not safe at all after bishop to b5. And for a lot of lower rated players, it's hard for them to see moves ahead like this, especially when the pieces that you're going to be using in the tricks are like still on the back rank. So these kind of tactics really do work in lower rated games like these. So after playing bishop to b5, their bishop can't really take your queen because it's pinned to their king. And so what you can do now after they try and defend the against the pin, so now they're thinking, well, now I can take the queen and it'll just be like a queen trade basically, is what they're hoping for here. But this is still a losing position after just bishop takes. So you just take their bishop, and then here they take back. Now they could take back with the knight, in which case you could just pick up their their rook at that point. But if they take back with the queen, it's actually a mate and 1. So you don't even take the rook, you just checkmate them on a c8. And so that's one that you could see if your opponent starts out trying to keep the defense on this pawn. For the next line, this is if your opponent tries to attack the knight with the queen early on and also defend the pawn. So they could play something like queen to d5, going after the knight and also defending the pawn. And here you can just play pawn to d3. They're most likely going to try and take because they might see that they could probably take this pawn if you capture it with the bishop. That is a possibility that they might spot that, or they might just want to get your material off the board. So you have less pieces to attack them with. That could also be a reasoning that they have. But here you could just let them take, and then you just take with the bishop. So you just allow them to take this pawn on g2, which does look kind of weird, but it's perfectly fine for white here. It's actually better if they do take, because this is where the trap happens here. So it looks like they could take your rook pretty easily, but you can actually just play bishop to e4 here. And so now they can't take the rook, they can't go on any of these squares because of the rook, and they can't even take the knight. So the only spot that they can go is to g4 here. And so they're defended by the bishop. So here you just do a queen trade, and then now because you brought your bishop to e4, you can take this pawn on b7, and then you will end up winning their rook. And for the last line that you could get into, your opponent could play something like pawn to f5, which really isn't a very good move at all. And so in this case, you just continue development with your light squared bishop. You just attack this weak f7 square. You also have some pretty good chances of getting a great lead in development as well. And so if they could try and defend with something like e6, and then here you just trade off the knight with the bishop. So you take their pawn, they take your knight, and then you take their bishop, and you get a pawn basically out of it. Or if they try and defend the f7 square with their knight, then you just continue by castling, or you could also play d3 as well. And that's all I have for today's video, guys. I hope y'all learned something new that you can put it into practice in your own games. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. And as always, thanks for watching.